Hey, everybody, welcome back to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook Olson. I am Charlie Jewett. And Brook, sounds like you have an interesting topic for us today. What's the title of today's show?
It's players in the drama triangle. And what we're trying to do in this is kind of identify what your role is and, why that's important. The drama triangle was first described by Dr. Stephen Partman back in the late 60s. And if you were to draw this triangle, which I think is kind of at least in your mind and something that you want to do, there would be a point at the bottom facing down, which would be the victim part of the triangle, and then the rescuer, and then the persecutor. And we're going to look at each one of these from a starting gate standpoint. So the place where all of us start from a place on this triangle. And what we have a tendency to do is once we enter that starting gate, we'll rotate through that cycle into persecutor, rescuer, and victim through the course of the engagement with our partner. And it's important to know that, our starting gate is how we come in, and then to be able to watch how we go from one to the other through the sequencing. We're all taking on, when we're looking at this, some view of being a victim, and how we associate to that, or how we react to it in a given situation, is an important piece to do. Our starting gate position in the victim triangle is not only where we most often enter the triangle, but it's also the role through which we actually define ourselves. Each person has a primary or most familiar role, and this is our entry point. And the rotation through the positions are essential to see how we create more conflict, both internally and externally. And when we can start to identify this stuff, we can start to break the patterning. That becomes just another place to get more conscious.
I'm looking at a picture of it right now. So drama triangles, it's been out there for a while. It's kind of a established thing.
Right.
So we got the victim on the
bottom. Not something I made up.
Well, you make up so much good stuff.
A lot of information on this.
So the victim piece is very common. Is that always a part of it when we're having drama with somebody?
Well, we'll have this standpoint that we enter from, and whether it's a persecutor or a rescuer, there's a victim standpoint within it, but how we enter it is from one of these other standpoints. So for instance, the victim is kind of a poor me, being oppressed, helpless. No one can help them. They're being persecuted by someone or the world. They keep the story and they play it out in all of their relationships. And this seems to be their constant focus or their entry point. And a starting gate victim believes they can't take care of themselves. They see themselves as constantly unable to handle life. They even rescue from a one down position with statements like saying things that to their potential rescuer, like, you're the only one who can help me. And these are, words of, oh, here I am, the rescuer. And that brings them in. That's kind of the hook that rescuer is longing to hear. And, as we rotate through that, there's this place where, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, where as that victim is always from a down position, they start to resent that piece, either from the persecutor or from the rescuer, and they start to act out from one of the other positions from there.
So they can actually be openly verbal like that. Just, you're the only person that can help me, or I need this person, or I'm going to die, or whatever it is.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And, from that persecution, or from that persecuted place of the victim, they're looking for a rescuer. They're looking for somebody to come in and save them, to take care of them financially, to take care of them physically, to take care of them emotionally. And it's really seductive if you come from a rescuer standpoint.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So the next piece that we want to look at in this is how the persecutor shows up and the entry point for that. So the persecutor, it's always your fault. They're critical, they're blaming, they're controlling. They come from a place of being superior. I'm better at this. And, like the other roles here, the starting gate persecutor is shame-based. As I look at this piece, there's kind of that narcissism that's in there, but it can also start to play out in some of the other places as well. This role is most often taken by someone who received overt mental or physical abuse during their childhood. That's that development of this personality as it relates to the triangle. And as a result, they're often secretly seething inside from a shame-based wrath that ends up running their lives. They burst out. They'll over-contain. Their survival. They repress their deep-seated feelings of worthiness. They hide their pain behind a facade of indignant wrath or uncaring detachment. They often choose to emulate their primary childhood abusers, preferring to identify with those they see as having power and strength. So this is that place where they develop, where they see that abusive person had power over them. And they take on that power piece of being able to push and to control and to overpower the victim, and they have control from that standpoint.
I'm assuming it's kind of subconscious. They're not saying I want to be exactly like the person that I am mad at for abusing me, but they sort of accidentally like say no one's going to push me around, and they end up being similar.
Well, it's a survival strategy. So if you look at this from a part standpoint, and this little child is being abused, they have a couple of different ways to start to relate. One is I'm going to be a victim, and I'm going to look for somebody to rescue me from this. And there's nobody rescuing them. They're not coming in and doing it. So they want to take on that power position. And from that power position, they can really start to control everything around them, right?
Right.
I can overpower you from here.
Yeah.
The statement can be, the world is hard and mean, and only the ruthless survive. Or they can withdraw, from being in relationship.
Yeah.
And they protect themselves using an authoritarian, controlling, or downright punishing method.
Yeah.
It's protection.
Yeah. Got it.
But there's an interesting piece, because this starting gate persecutor, if you will, they see themselves as victims in need of protection. This is how they can so easily justify their vengeful behavior. They asked for it. They got what they deserved. That's the way they see it. And their core beliefs might go something like this. The world is dangerous. People can't be trusted, so I need to get them before they hurt me.
Right.
And this attitude sets them up to think that they must strike out in order to defend against inevitable attack.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a natural defense setup, right? As a child, you're in this place of, what do I do? How do I gather my survival around it?
Yeah.
And each one of these positions has that type of perspective to it. And as I do my work, and I work with clients around this parts perspective, looking at it from an abuse perspective, we can see each one of these parts within us. We can see how each one of these has developed and how the strength of one of these pieces is how we enter into relationship, and especially how we enter into conflict.
Right, right. Tiger wants to be on the show today. Can you hear him?
Yeah, that's cool.
You want me to put him in a room or something?
Oh, no, Tiger's fine. He can sit
Hey,
there.
wait. No, you need to wait. Go lay down. Go. All right.
Right. I like to have the dogs in the room. They bring a calming, even if they're being annoying. You know, they can be that reflection piece of us where, you know, want some attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, part of the way these persecutor types show up is by overcoming their feelings of helplessness and shame by overpowering. You know, we just talked about domination is their most prevalent style of interaction. Me over you. I'm going to stomp you down. I'm going to shut you down.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any power in this relationship at all. And this means that they always have to be right. And that their methods include bullying, preaching, threatening, blaming, lecturing, interrogating, and outright attack. They believe in getting even, very often through aggressive acts. And, you know, just like some of the others, the rescuer piece, they need someone to fix. And the persecutor needs someone to blame.
Yeah. Interesting.
And you can see, you know, if the listeners can listen to this conversation that we're starting to have, you can see how this evolves through the conversation of, I start out as a persecutor and I move into being a victim, or I start out as a victim and I move into being a persecutor, or I start out as a rescuer and I end up being a victim. And these roles always change within the dynamic. It's where we start, but it's not ever where we end.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay?
Yep.
So if you can think of a situation that you're in, you can start to identify, maybe it's easier for you to identify with the other. But when you start to interact with the other, and you can look at your own interactions, then you can start to see how you progress through the rotation and how they progress through the rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a relationship with somebody who you feel persecuted by, and there's this person over here that comes in, and this happens so often in divorce, and especially when we get into new relationships, you can see how that rescuer is really helpful at a point, and then you start to get resentful of them. Because they're taking over and they're telling you what to do and they're telling you how to do it. And then you start to persecute them. And they become the victim. And then how this persecutor is coming at you, and you get angrier and angrier and angrier at them. And finally, you lose it and you start to victimize them. You start to overpower them. You start to take on this idea of victim violence.
Mm-hmm.
Goes around and around and around.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. These persecutors deny their vulnerability in the same way a rescuer might deny their needs. Their greatest fear is powerlessness, and because they judge and deny their own inadequacy, their fear and their vulnerability, they'll need someplace else to protect these disowned feelings. Again, parts stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, in other words, they need a victim. They need some place to put it, and
Yeah.
they have to go after something outside of them. They
Yeah.
need someone they perceive as weak to prove themselves and that their own destructively painful story about the world is true.
Sounds like such a pleasant person to find.
Well, yeah, they're a pleasant person to find. And
I'm teasing. I'm
again,
teasing. The
no, I know you are.
pursuer sounds awful.
I
A persecutor, right?
persecutor. But we've got that own piece working internally too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is just what we're doing to externalize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our own disempowerment that we're trying to overcome.
Yep.
And again, if we look at this around, the concept of narcissism and our own narcissism and the external narcissist and all of these pieces that kind of blend into the persecutor piece, that, they also tend to compensate for their inner feelings of worthlessness, by putting on grandiose airs. Grandiosity inevitably comes out of shame, and it's a compensation to cover up for deep inferiority. The superiority is the attempt to swing hard at the other side of less than, or in order to come across as better than.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the narcissist story. But again, we're not putting labels externally on this because this is all an internal construct that's just trying to work its way out. And why we're having this conversation today, why this subject is up around the drama triangle, is for us to start to identify our entry point.
Yeah.
And to be able to look at how we perceive the world. I'm being awfully quiet today.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it also for myself. I mean, I think I most identify with the victim, although it doesn't show up necessarily as a whiny baby type victim all the time, but I don't really have drama in my life by trying to control other people. I may accidentally do some rescuing, but I very much can identify with when I feel wronged or like something is not right. And
Right.
you should not be doing this, talking to me that way or treating me this way or whatever. And I rise up, probably like feel the victim part of it and then go, no, I'm going to take control of this and switch over sort of the persecutor role.
Right. And that's the piece that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other place for all of us, I mean, this is kind of one of my hitches, or has been one of my hitches in the past, and it's not quite so prevalent these days, but that role of the rescuer.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody who is struggling. They're struggling financially. They're struggling emotionally. This is one of the places that happens in the stages of divorce where we hook up with another partner sometimes that is also in a high conflict situation, and we become each other's rescuers. We become collusive in that process. And somebody may be struggling financially, so I remember doing this with my second marriage where I had a partner that I had move in with me because she was really struggling, and that relationship grew into something more than just a roommate situation. And I was always in that place of power because of my financial stability, which ended up ruining me because I was taking care of everybody else. I was taking care of her. I was taking care of her kids. And I wasn't paying attention to my own world.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really problematic. And then, she rose up out of that victim place, or that place of being rescued, and said, basically, up yours, I'm disempowered. I'm going to take power here.
Mm-hmm.
And that rotated me back into a victim standpoint of kind of, losing everything.
Yeah.
And that's going to sound familiar to a lot of people in this process.
Yeah.
So as we start to play in these arenas, we want to really come into from the parts conversation again to understand those parts within us that have developed that component, that entry point, or that starting gate portion of us, and then bring in that higher big S self component to be really able to help us regulate this. So here's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm trying to rescue this person, and they're giving me a lot of pushback. Oh, this is this dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go, you know what? I'm going to back off of the rescue and I'm going to let them figure it out. And they might go into another place of, oh, you're not taking care of me anymore, and drop back into that victim place, and then rise up to a persecutor trying to get you to come in from a different angle, right?
Yeah.
And if you can just stay put in it and go, I'm not going to engage in that, back to the 3 rules, everything always rotates around that, then we are staying true to ourselves. We're staying in our own place of struggle, because we are in struggle too when we're drawn into this stuff. But we're not engaging in and taking care of or blaming somebody else for what's taking place. We're just hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can do this in a healthy manner, and we've got a healthy partner that can meet us in that, going, that they understand their own roles in this, then there starts to be self-regulation in the patterning. And this triangle becomes less powerful and or dissolves. Usually it doesn't dissolve. It's just more conscious. It's like, okay, here I am. This is my role. Uh-oh, I'm going to shift. Mm-hmm. So that's bringing up that higher conscious piece of what's happening here. Oops.
Yeah, gotcha. Interesting. So you identify with the rescuer piece. You've seen that in the past, but did some work on it. So people can change. You can identify this and work on it, right?
For sure. And that rescuer piece, let's talk about for this piece for a minute, because it's powerful.
Yeah.
And it really is disempowering to somebody who is in that victim standpoint. We're kind of taking their karma away from trying to figure it out, right? We all may need some help, but we don't want to go and rescue.
Mm-hmm.
So the rescuer sees themselves as helpers and caretakers. This is you and me to a large extent, Charlie. I mean, it's kind of at the base of what we do, right?
Yeah.
We want to help.
Yeah.
And then we need somebody to rescue. It's poor you. Let me help. It's an enabler. It's a pain reliever. And it keeps the victim dependent. So it's a power position. Again, that victim is kind of at the bottom of the triangle, and we've got a rescuer and a persecutor that are more in a power position.
Yeah.
We're creating dependency. We're creating power. You need me. You're not going to leave me. And again, it is it's a survival mechanism. And this might be, a little bit of narcissism. It might be a little bit of the borderline thrown in there, but it's a scrambling to keep relationship, right?
Yeah.
And the starting gate rescuer, that person is, they're the classic codependent. And they tend to be enabling, overly protective, and the one who wants to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody that's listening to this, stop and think about that one for a minute. Where you want to fix it, or where you want somebody else to fix it. This is a classic piece. Oftentimes when we're coming out of a divorce and we've been with somebody who is a narcissist or a borderline type personality, we're looking at that from a victim standpoint, and we're looking for somebody to help us, to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It could even be an attorney that's playing this role, or a therapist that's playing this role, and it's seductive. And it's the place where we need to start to understand how we need to take care of ourselves. Rescuing is an addiction that comes from the unconscious need to feel valued. There's no better way to feel important than to be a savior. And taking care of others may be the rescuer's best game plan for getting that feeling of being worthwhile.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh. It's interesting. I definitely feel like I lean more towards the persecutor just more often than the rescuer. I mean, I have a caring personality and I do want to help and I want to fix things. But I don't feel any temptation to, I don't even think subconsciously to make other people dependent on me, as a power type move or whatever. But
That's interesting.
yeah.
Something to look at.
Yeah.
These rescuers usually grow up in families where their dependency needs are not acknowledged. It's a psychological fact that we treat ourselves the way that we were treated as children.
Mm.
And the rescuer grows up in an environment where their needs were neglected, so they tend to treat themselves with the same degree of negligence and that they experienced as children.
Yeah.
And without permission to take care of themselves, their needs go underground and they turn instead of to taking care of others.
Yeah.
I'm not taking care of my own needs. I am going to gather. Again, this is kind of the classic thing that I did in my first marriage, or my second marriage rather, is I put all my resources to taking care of my ex-wife's children.
Yeah.
There was a point of, if I do this, my wife is going to see, what a good guy I am and the value. And I didn't see any of that in the moment.
Yeah.
And then when everything came undone, it was like, yeah, it's discarded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's that piece there. And behind all of this is the magical belief that said out loud might sound kind of like, if I take care of them long enough, then sooner or later they will take care of me. That giving to get conversation that we've had before in these podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've already learned, this just basically doesn't happen. And when we rescue the needy, we can't expect anything back. They can't even take care of themselves, much care of us.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get them to take care of us when they can't take care of themselves. If we're taking care of them, it's really a ridiculous look at trying to get a needs met piece, right?
Yeah.
And these rescuers, they're unconsciously encouraging dependency because they believe that if you need me, you won't leave me. And they scramble to make themselves indispensable in order to avoid abandonment.
Yeah. Wow.
The rescuer is the victim. The victim role becomes a martyr, complaining loudly, after all I've done to you, this is the thanks I get.
Identify with that part. I was looking at that in the outline, like I'm not finding myself in the rescuer like much, but man, I identify with that sentence. And it's not as much what I've done for you. It's more how I've treated you or acted or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
I've been a good guy.
Been a good guy, yeah.
I've, been there for you. I've done all this stuff and you're going to treat me like this?
Right, exactly.
So that's that victim standpoint. And that's where each one of these components has that, that victim perspective in it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the wrap of everything that I wanted to go through. There's a lot of stuff available online for you guys to think about, to look at in this triangle. But this model, in looking at how we engage in conflict, how we see the world, and how we react to what's coming at us from anybody, from a partner, from an ex-partner, and how we develop these pieces is really important, because here's the next piece. This is what we're giving our kids. We're setting our kids up for one of these by how we set this up. So either by being superior, not taking care of their needs, by being a victim, by having our kids take care of us, we're setting them up for a victim, a persecutor, or a rescuer. And what we want to do is pull ourselves out of this hole, and we want to seal it so our children don't fall into this hole.
Right.
Everybody's going to have a component, but we want to be conscious of it. We want to have our own conversations with it, so we know what our languaging is around this, and where we can come back and have the conversation with our kids about what each one of these means and how it works in the world. I've got a partner right now that's really good at this piece about, hey, don't rescue me. And I'm going, yep, I got it. Not going to do it. And I can see that you're in turmoil, and I'm going to let you figure it out.
I see. Gotcha.
And she does the same for me, because she's had that rescuer piece involved. And sometimes when she doesn't come to my aid, I get pissed.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I work it out and I go, thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's an empowering piece.
Right.
So everybody, listen to this. Listen to this podcast more than once. Give it to your partner. Give it to your friends. Propagate this idea, because this is an important concept that can be incredibly helpful for your life.
That's awesome. That's good stuff, man. I'd actually never heard the term before, but I would do some deeper research on it too, man. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.